Italy. These are images of the first meeting between French President Emmanuel Macron and Prime Minister Modi, a bilateral that's taking place before the official G7 summit, a very crucial one at that. And once again, you can see the warmth between the two leaders, which has always been on display. In fact, just months ago, when you had also French President Macron coming down for the Republic Day celebrations, the bonhomie between the two leaders was clear. So this is the second meeting happening in this year alone. They greeted each other with hugs and a handshake, and of course this bilateral will be crucial. Beyond this, there are several other policides also expected, where the Prime Minister will be meeting with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. There's also one expected with the United States, with President Joe Biden, and also with the Italian Prime Minister Meloni. So it'll be important to see what are the takeaways from each of these bilaterals. But India-France ties have progressed significantly in the last many years under the Modi government. And this is the first meeting between the two leaders after, of course, the Prime Minister has come back for a third term. So it'll be important to also see what kind of discussions are held, what are the issues that are essentially raised in this particular bilateral. Now, we've seen, in fact, a huge boost in defence ties, particularly between India and France, ensuring more cooperation, particularly with regards to defence equipment manufacturing. There's been also a lot of breakthrough as far as space exploration goes, which we saw even a few months ago when President Macron was in India. But we've seen the kind of takeaways and the breakthroughs, really, between India and France relations in the last many years, particularly. Geeta Mohan is joining us with more details on this. Geeta, images on our screens of the bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and President Macron. What's really on the agenda of this bilateral? A crucial one, the second time these two leaders are meeting this year.
Well, that's right, a very important one. India and France share very, very good relations. And remember when India had sent an invitation for the Republic Day parade to the United States of America, there was a last-minute decision to cancel, and the country that stepped in was France. So that's the kind of relationship India and France share. It was a fantastic, spectacular welcome for the French president, and he had gone to Jaipur. Right now, what we're looking at is enhancement in terms of defense cooperation between the two sides. We're looking at a larger contingent and number of aircraft, Rafales, that India will be picking up, not just for the Air Force, but also for the Navy. And the conversations are all on civil nuclear cooperation between India and France as well, because that's another aspect on clean, renewable energy that both countries are looking at. So forward movement, and I keep saying this, Akshita, that there are many countries in Europe and in other parts where there is going to be change of guard. France is also after the massive win for the far right in the EU elections. Macron also has called for snap elections. So we do not really know whether he is going to be the president next time around or not. UK Prime Minister also has called for an early election. There are going to be massive changes in Europe, but they all know that there's one country where there's going to be continuum and continuity. There's clarity there, and that's India. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi, with his third term, having won the mandate for the third time, has come now to Italy to meet world leaders, where they know that there is continuum in foreign policy when it comes to India. So they can take a lot of conversations forward, should they be in power or not. Because foreign policy does not change overnight, but yes, major deals do, and there can be a stop or with a leadership change that can really be put to can come to a screeching halt. So the fact that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has returned to power is one of the reasons why the world leaders will be engaging Prime Minister Modi to take conversations forward on free trade agreements, on defense cooperation, on social mobility, on mobility deals with regards to opportunities in various countries, particularly in Italy, where Italy has raised the cap. But the first bilateral meeting has begun. That's between Prime Minister Modi and French President Macron. It will be followed by other bilateral meetings, which include German Chancellor Scholz, and then the Prime Minister of Japan, Kishida. There is going to be a meeting between Prime Minister Modi and his Italian counterpart, and everybody, Akshita, is going to wait for those micro moments between the two leaders. a selfie, a light conversation that certainly will create buzz on social media. So everybody's waiting for that moment. But for now, let's begin with the India-France bilateral.
All right, so this is the first of many more power-packed bilaterals that you can expect over the next few hours, images of which we will beam live here on India Today. We've got our cameras focused on what's happening in South Italy along the beautiful coastline of Italy is where the G7 is happening. So it's set on a beautiful backdrop there. And this is the first bilateral between Prime Minister Modi and President Macron. No doubt, congratulatory messages also pouring in for Prime Minister Modi, his first foreign tour, his first foreign trip after assuming charge as the Prime Minister for a third term. And Geeta very rightly pointing out how you're seeing in several other countries, all of them at the cusp of a very, very important election. Whereas here in India, we're done and dusted with another election, and Prime Minister Modi going there with a sense of stability, knowing that he's already been voted for a third term. Whereas all these other leaders gearing up for elections. So it'll be very interesting power play that you're going to be witnessing there in Italy. But there's no doubt that as the Prime Minister's touched down there, all of these world leaders will use this as an opportunity to also personally congratulate him. There were many phone calls exchanged, one from Macron as well to Prime Minister Modi soon after the mandate that he received to be the Prime Minister once again. So it'll be interesting to see what really are takeaways from this bilateral. Largely, if you look at how India-France ties have progressed, Geeta, over the last few years, it's been, very, very positive, particularly on the strategic front. All right, we've lost that connection with Geeta. We'll reconnect with her. She is live joining us from Apulia, where she's tracking all the live updates and these images coming in right now of the first bilateral that Prime Minister Modi is engaging in, fittingly with France, a country which India, of course, has engaged with in the last many years. And we've seen that translate to also deeper defense ties in particular. But let's tell you what's happened so far in Italy and what's expected in the next few hours. This is the first bilateral. After this, the Prime Minister will be meeting with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. He also has another bilateral scheduled with the Japanese Prime Minister Kishida and then with Italian Prime Minister Meloni as well. So it will be important to see what really is the messaging behind each of these bilaterals. The G7 summit, which is what Prime Minister Modi has gone to Italy for, has officially kicked off in Bari. This is in the Puglia region. French President Emmanuel Macron, UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, US President Joe Biden, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Japan Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Prime Minister Modi are all in Italy for this grand Group of 7 meet. Remember, Prime Minister Modi was personally invited by the Italian Prime Minister to be there for the G7 summit. After arriving at the Brindisi airport in Italy's Apulia, Prime Minister Modi did put out a post on social media saying he's looking forward to engaging in productive discussions with world leaders. There's a lot to look forward to in the G7 summit. But besides that, like the images you see on your screens, there are several pull-asides, several very, very important bilaterals. This is Modi's first trip abroad after assuming office for the third consecutive term. Prime Minister Modi recalled Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni's visit to India and said that he is committed to bolster India-Italy ties during his visit. India, of course, holds an extremely influential position in the Group of 7 as the largest growing economy and strategic partnership with all 7 countries building up in the last few years.
Day 2 of the G7 summit over here, where the outreach sessions with guest nations will also take place, and which is why Prime Minister Narendra Modi landed late last night and will be not only attending that outreach session, but where artificial intelligence, climate change, energy, Mediterranean, Africa are going to be focus areas. He is also going to focus on the challenges, as he said in his departure statement, that it is time to address global challenges and foster international cooperation. That is going to be a focus area as well. A lot of bilaterals have been lined up with the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, German Chancellor Scholz, French President Macron, and also the important bilateral with his Italian counterpart, Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. Let's see if there are going to be micro moments over there, but certainly key substantive issues are going to be spoken of. While there are many elections around the corner in other countries like the French elections, the UK elections, we have the US elections end of the year, and there could be change of guard in those countries. There's certainty in India because there is continuum, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi assuming office for the third time and this being his first foreign visit. The leaders will come with that entire certainty that the conversations with India can move forward. There were free trade agreements that had not been signed. There are conversations on various deals, cooperation in the strategic and defense sector. All those conversations will be taken forward because they know that with India there comes continuity and continuum. So those conversations will take place. In the outreach session, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be joined by Pope Francis.
All right, and this is the second bilateral that's kicked off between Prime Minister Modi and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Again, two leaders with great chemistry, great bonding. You see that on your screens as well, with the warm hug that was exchanged and the handshakes that have followed. Another very crucial bilateral, but you can see Prime Minister Sunak also greeting Prime Minister Modi with a namaste. Of course, with his Indian roots, we've seen that particularly lead to greater bonding between the two leaders previously as well. But another important highlight is the timing of this meeting. There's no doubt that while the Prime Minister has gone into this visit after a mandate for his government, after returning as the Prime Minister for a third term, for Rishi Sunak, over the next few weeks, his fate will be sealed by the British public as the UK elections are slated to happen. So almost every world leader on that stage has a very crucial election, a mandate that will decide his or her fate this year, while Prime Minister Modi has already been elected for a third term and has visited there as his first foreign visit. As far as UK relations, as far as India-UK relations are concerned, we've seen, of course, that it's on a trajectory where it's set for robust growth. And in each of these cases, of course, the government plays a very, very crucial role as well. For Prime Minister Modi and UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, they've got that personal bonding as well, which has been very evident also last year when Sunak had visited India along with his family. And, of course, those pictures went viral of him visiting several of the most iconic locations of the country, including the beautiful Akshardham temple as well. He's always embraced his Indian roots. He's always embraced his Indian upbringing and traditions and values that he holds very, very dear to him. He's spoken about that repeatedly as well. And, of course, it's a driving force, as I mentioned, of the bonding between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Sunak. You can see the two leaders there deep in conversation after that warm welcome that they've accorded to each other. Each of these leaders, of course, will be extending their personal congrats also to Prime Minister Modi on the mandate that he's received to return as the Prime Minister for the third term. And it'll be important to see what really are the takeaways from each of these bilaterals. Remember, these are happening before the G7 summit. So much really to talk about and look forward to as far as the agenda and the takeaways of this foreign visit is concerned. Because you've got all of the biggest countries being represented on one stage. The G7 is an elite group of developed countries. And India has a very special relationship with each one of them, whether it's France, the UK, whether it's Italy, Germany, the United States, or the other countries, or Japan for that matter, with whom again there is a bilateral scheduled. After this, the Prime Minister will also be meeting with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz as well as Japanese Prime Minister Mr. Kishida. Beyond this, it's also expected that there will be a pull-aside, a bilateral with President Biden as well, another important meeting to look forward to. But you see really the images on your screens of the two meetings that have happened so far. And what you sense in both is the Prime Minister, of course, knows these leaders personally, having worked with them for the last many years. He knows full well about the importance of having great relations with these countries, what they bring on to the table, and knowing these world leaders personally as well, which is what you see in those images. So the second bilateral taking place on the sidelines of the G7 is with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. And those images on the left of your screens. There is, of course, a lot of talk about issues that will come up in this bilateral. There is going to be a focus hugely on the Indo-Pacific and also on issues with regards to welfare of Indians who are settled currently in the United Kingdom, strategic ties, something very crucial between India and the United Kingdom as well, where we've seen growth in leaps and bounds over the last few years. Now, so far, when we've seen steps being taken with regards to visa restrictions being relaxed, when we've seen clearly a message as far as China is concerned to ensure that economic exposure to China is reduced, we've seen reciprocity from the UK on these issues, which has also generated quite a bit of buzz of how the future of the relationship with UK could progressively get better in the months and years to come. But of course, we'll have to wait and watch to see what the mandate of the British public will be on whether we will see these kind of meetings between Prime Minister Sunak and Prime Minister Modi happen in the weeks to come as well after the election in the United Kingdom, or if there will be a change in regime. Gaurav Samant is joining us with more details on this. Gaurav, the Prime Minister in Italy has already been part of two extremely crucial bilaterals. What do you think will really be the takeaway first from the bilateral with France, with President Macron?
So these are extremely crucial meetings that are taking place, and these are a part of a series of bilaterals and multilaterals that India has been having. You'd recall that Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been big on engaging world partners, and India has emerged as a major voice for the global south. Global South and Africa are very important parts of the discussions in this G7. India, of course, as you well know, has been a critical part now for the past 5 years of the outreach as far as the G7 is concerned. And India has also successfully conducted G20 when all these leaders were in India, were in Delhi. So as far as India and France are concerned, India and France, apart from defense, clean energy space, they've been engaging on a number of issues and very close engagement on environment, on green and clean energy. Both countries have been having a lot of very detailed discussions. India's bought 36 Rafale fighter jets. India's in talks when it comes to submarines. India's in talks with France and with other countries in the world. Indo-Pacific is a very important aspect of the conversation that takes place. India plays a very critical role. Now, the fact that India is currently the 5th largest economy in the world, on our way to becoming the 3rd largest economy in the world, these countries are very keen to remain engaged with India, not just, on the economy aspect, but also on the security aspect and on the clean energy aspect, on the environment aspect.
I'm going to come back to you, Gaurav. My apologies for interrupting, but I want to bring in Geeta Mohan, a Foreign Affairs editor. She's joining us live right now from Bari in Italy, where all of these meetings are taking place. Geeta, it's over to you. Second bilateral also done with Prime Minister Sunak. What's next? What's on the cards?
Well, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, and that's going to be an interesting and important one. Akshita, we were talking about how there could be a pull aside, but there is a bilateral meeting. Immediately after Rishi Sunak, it's Zelenskyy who is going to meet. So the focus of Russia-Ukraine was yesterday amongst the G7 leaders, and today with Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting Zelenskyy, a very crucial and critical one. India clearly shows that it is a peacemaker. It is a voice of sanity in a world fraught with danger, fraught with war, and we will have to see how the messaging is carried forward when Prime Minister Narendra Modi addresses the outreach session. The focus certainly is going to be artificial intelligence, climate change, energy, the Mediterranean, Indo-Pacific, as also Africa, but and how to counter China. But the fact is that over here we will be looking at how Prime Minister Modi is going to raise the issues and concerns of humanitarian crisis because of the war. Zelenskyy already during his meetings yesterday had a huge pledge by the G7 leaders, a security pact, a 10-year security pact with about $50 billion that would be used from the Russian foreign interests from the Russian foreign assets that have been frozen. So that's a very important decision that has come from the world leaders here. We will have to see how Moscow reacts to this decision because it's their assets. the interest of which is now going to be diverted to Ukraine. But this meeting is going to be very crucial. Let's see what the outcome of the meeting is. What's the messaging? What's the message that Zelenskyy has come with when he went into that room to meet Prime Minister Modi?
That will be a very, very crucial one to watch out for. But let's talk about the two images on our screens, Geeta. The meeting that's happened already with France as well as with the United Kingdom. Two very important bilaterals, two very important strategic allies of India.
Well, that's right. Look at the visuals. They are friends. They have been friends. And Akshita, like we were discussing just a while ago, the French President Macron had come at the very last minute when India needed a chief guest for the Republic Day parade. And now we're looking at Rishi Sunak, who also met with Prime Minister Modi. Again, a very important relationship, a very important friendship between India and UK. There have been problems. There are niggling areas. We're still looking at how the two countries are going to come forward with a free trade agreement. There had been announcements of this Diwali and this Christmas, so on and so forth. But now they're inching closer. We do not know whether there's going to be full-fledged free trade agreement, but there certainly are elections in the UK. Rishi Sunak looks in a very, very tight spot. So if the Labour returns, is it going to be difficult for India to then strike a deal, or will there have to be a restart of conversations? These are critical areas that we'll have to look at. Foreign policy certainly a continuum when it comes to India. The Indian Premier here meeting the world leaders with third mandate for the third time. So it is very important, and the world leaders now know that they can move forward with whatever they have. Barring a few countries, there isn't much of a change in other countries. But these countries where there are elections, there could be change. So let's see what the conversations are going to be with Rishi Sunak as well as Macron, because both of them are headed into polls.
So we'll wait for a communication that is expected on what really was discussed in these two bilaterals. And of course, as Geeta tells us, coming up are also a series of very important meetings, including one with Zelenskyy. We'll be tracking all the latest updates coming in from Italy, from the G7 summit, and the sidelines of which you're seeing these bilaterals also taking place with some of the most important allies of India. Thanks very much, Geeta, for joining us with all of those details.